Hey y'all, good morning. This is Madison Kutschke, and I did my favorite anatomical project or feature project on skull morphology, so on how different animals have different skull shapes and specifically how that has impacted their feeding adaptations, so carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, and so on. So this is my presentation. All right, so just starting out, I want to start by defining two key terms that we have. The first of which is going to be just what is skull morphology. And skull morphology is referring to the shape and structure of the skull. It includes the bones and the muscles that attach to it. And then feeding adaptations are traits that allow animals to efficiently process their diet. So, understanding this relationship really matters because skull shape will affect the bite force of this animal and the chewing efficiency, and it can even have health implications in our domestic animals specifically. Um, okay, so I want to start by comparing how domestication has really changed from what our wild animals were. So, domestication has dramatically altered the skull morphology of these animals. Specifically, dogs is what I'm going to be mainly focusing on in this presentation. Um, but by domesticating these animals and with our dogs specifically getting all of these different breeds, we have really um, selected traits for size of these skulls of the animals, for appearance of them. And by doing that and creating all these different breeds and domesticating them from their wolves ancestors, we have really impacted and changed their cranial architecture. So, a lot of research has been done on using geometric morphometrics and biomechanical modeling to quantify these changes and predict feeding performances. And these methods can help us link form to function specifically. So, geometric morphometrics is a technique that uses 3D landmark-based models to quantify cranial shape variations between wild and domestic species very precisely. Biomechanical modeling is a finite element that analyzes and will use calculations to calculate the bite force and the jaw mechanics to predict feeding performance non-invasively. Muscle dissection studies have been done to examine what muscles are attached to what part of the skull, if they're tighter in certain areas, if they're not even present in certain areas, and so forth. That can influence how strongly these animals can bite down. And then finally, the evolutionary impact of domestication. Like I mentioned, just breeding all these different kinds of dogs specifically has really led to a lot of health implications and just impacted the kind of diets that they can have as well. So this image right here is just comparing. This is an example of using geometric morphometrics. This is muscle dissection through geometric morphometrics. It's specifically isolating each muscle in the skull and showing if it would or would not be present on this specific kind of dog. Okay, so next we have dog skull shape and bite force. So in dogs, the skull shape strongly predicts the bite force. Are certain breeds like the brachiocephalic ones, like our bulldogs, Frenchies, that sort of thing. They actually have the short, wide skulls, and but they can produce a higher bite force than a dog of their size. So if you have a bulldog and a beagle compared to each other, the bulldog is going to actually have a stronger bite force because of the way its jaw is formed compared to the beagle, even though they're relatively the same size of a dog, based on just how their skull is shaped. The bulldog, the brachiocephalic face, will have a stronger bite force. Um, Dolichocephalic breeds like greyhounds with the really long and narrow skulls, they're suited for much more slicing rather than crushing. So, despite this intense artificial selection, studies show that the jaw system remains functionally integrated. So, each one has more of a skill set. So, like I said, those greyhounds, they can slice more than crush. And then the bulldogs, they'll have just a stronger bite force in general compared to other dogs of their size. So one way that we can actually measure bite force, we've all seen with the canines how they wear the protective sleeve and they'll say their trigger word and they'll go attack. A way to measure that, there are different sensors that can be placed inside of these sleeves, and when the dog bites down, that can be a good way to measure safely how much PSI is actually going into that bite. Okay. So, getting away from just dogs, actually, there's also been a lot of studies down in pigs, comparing wild pigs to domestic pig skulls. So in the top left corner here, this is a wild pig skull, and then in the bottom left is the domestic pig skull. So you can really tell how just shrunken in the domestic skull has gotten, whereas the wild one is much more elongated. Um, so this has influenced their feeding adaptations. Domestic pigs have muscle changes that have much softer diets, but our wild pigs, which is the long skull again, they have much more robust features for tougher vegetation. So they're not getting their food handed to them in a little trough twice a day. They're having to go out and fight for these meals and basically make them themselves, obviously. So they have to have much stronger jaws and much more robust features to be able to cut through what they need to get their meals. So similar to dogs, selective breeding and captivity have altered these skulls quite a bit. It's altered their chewing mechanics. Similar in horses, how they have that grinding their teeth compared to up and down chewing. That can influence their health as well. And then their welfare, because then we obviously have to adapt with our domestic pigs to make sure that they can eat properly and that they're getting the right nutrients that they need and such forth. Okay. Um, so domestication reduced the need for these strong jaws that the wild boars have, which has led to the muscle architecture change in the cranial shape. Um, yes, so the functional demands shape morphology. Okay. So then we also have had some research done in our horses and rabbits. So that top right image is of a horse skull and the bottom right is of a rabbit. So cranial shape and feeding in horses. Um, so this kind of goes back to what I mentioned a moment ago on how their chewing has changed. Instead of going up and down to chew their food, their teeth really grind together in a side-to-side motion. This has a lot of dental impacts actually because of the shape of their skull. Instead of chewing up and down like majority of our animals do, um, when they grind their teeth together, they have a lot higher risk of chipping, and just their teeth continuing to grow. Like both of our horses and our rabbits, their teeth do continuously grow throughout their life. So then that can lead to dental illnesses, diseases, and just injuries in general. But they did have to adapt to that because of their diets. So compared to our dogs that are eating much more meat, these animals are much more grasses, hays, and that sort of thing. So, breeding here has not been as much influential because both our wild and our domestic horses and rabbits have a similar skull shape compared to the pigs where they were vastly different. So really it has been just the teeth that have influenced their dietary needs here. Okay, so skull and feeding relationships. All right, so across of our species, we have seen both convergent and divergent outcomes. Convergent meaning the similar adaptations for stronger bite forces in both our dogs and our pigs, and then divergent, rabbits and horses that are showing their unique skull features that are changed to change their skull features that are tied to their diet and selection pressures. And then plasticity and structural integration are common themes amongst all of these species. So, similarly, domestication alters the skull morphology in species like our dogs and our pigs, but then dietary changes have been through our horses and our rabbits. Okay, so with all this research, where are we going from here? So this has had a lot of influence specifically in vet med. Dietary needs, the best example that we're able to give right now is we have a wild wolf out in nature. He has the incredibly strong bite force, powerful teeth to really chew through his prey. Whereas our golden retrievers back home, they're getting Purina Pro Plan twice a day. So it's much softer food. So their bite force over time through this domestication and species selection has really lessened. That goes back into where the muscles have changed as well. There are a lot of health implications that are being done, for example, like our brachiocephalics. So surgeries are a great example of this, how we've based off their skull shape, we've had to change our surgery techniques. So when brachycephalic dogs are intubated, they have to wait a lot longer with that E-tube before it can come out when waking up from surgery, just because of how their skull is formed to make sure they're getting proper airflow and oxygen to their blood. So future research is really focusing on, again, go back to it over here. The morphological studies that are scanning to find these muscle shapes and everything like that. So optimizing feeding performance and welfare in these domestic animals has been the biggest challenge, is how do we take what was wild and then its skull has changed and adjust its feeding and dietary needs to that. Mhm. Need specific. And yeah. And then these are all of my references. I also use these for the essay and everything, but they have some really great research showing specifically the pig one was fascinating, just comparing the two skull types, um, and then the horses to the rabbits as well. But yeah, thank you for listening.